Hi, this is Glenda Funk with the Master Teacher Project, and I would like to show you a lesson that I taught today in my English class, and it is a formula for composing compound sentences and avoiding run-on sentences. This is how I asked students to label their papers today. So I taught this little lesson while I was sitting at my computer, had the projector on, and typed notes. It's a very short lecture, and I'm replicating it here. In order for me to teach the lesson, I want to remind students the definition of a sentence. And we define a sentence as a subject and a verb expressing a complete thought. That's very much a grammar book definition of the sentence. So I also like to give students a definition that I first heard from the grammarian Constance Weaver, and that definition is that a sentence is a subject doing. And that seems to be something students understand pretty well. From there, I remind students of the definition of a compound sentence. And the definition of a compound sentence is two or more sentences connected with punctuation. And of course, sometimes that's with other words too. At this point, I'm ready to give students a little formula that I have for a sentence, and that is a subject plus a verb, and here of course I mean a verb phrase, but I'm trying to keep this simple for them, equals a complete thought. And that's the definition of a sentence in a little bit simpler form by way of a formula. After that, I tell students I'm going to teach them a formula that looks a little bit like a mathematical formula, and it is a formula that will help them understand how we compose sentences and connect sentences together. So we began with the idea of a sentence first, followed by a period, a sentence followed by a period. After that, I give them the next part of the formula, which is a sentence followed by a semicolon, and then a sentence with a period. Then we go to the sentence followed by a comma, and at this point, then we're going to have a coordinating conjunction, and the coordinating conjunctions are represented by the acronym FANBOYS, which many of you may have heard of before. So the for is first, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. That's the acronym FANBOYS, which stands for Coordinating Conjunctions. I learned that little formula from a student teacher a few years ago, and I really like it and have found it to be really successful. This year I discovered none of my students know the acronym, so perhaps other teachers are no longer teaching that. Then we go to the formula sentence, semicolon, and I want to remind them of conjunctive adverbs at this point, and I put some, however, moreover, furthermore, as examples on the board. I don't list all of the conjunctive adverbs because there are many conjunctive adverbs, and a quick Google search will reveal many. At this point then I have to add in a comma, of course, followed by a sentence and a period. And how run-on sentences typically originate or often originate in student writing is with what I call the empty set, the sentence, comma, sentence, period. Now, my students might not all understand the terminology that I've used, so I will define a few terms before moving on. I will remind them that this is the empty set that I highlighted earlier, and I put a strike through it, and I want them to do that on their paper because that's the big no-no. I don't want them using only a comma to connect two sentences. And I remind them that conjunctions, and here I'm still using the strike through, so I want to correct that. Conjunctions are words that connect, and they show relationships. Now I use the term coordinating conjunction. And gave the acronym FANBOYS, which I'll just put here. And I used the term conjunctive adverb, which is a big scary term for many students, but I like to give them the examples and tell them a conjunctive adverb is a word, and in this case an adverb, that connects and shows relationships. And of course those relationships can be cause-effect, sequence, compare and contrast, among other things. But that's enough for now. I'm trying to keep the grammar simple and help them learn some basic things about grammar that will improve their writing, make them feel more successful in writing, and not draw attention to surface errors in their writing. So I take a less is more approach at this point in their education. I'm ready now to move on to my sample sentences. And sometimes I have students who act up a little bit, as most teachers do, or they waste a little time, and today was one of those days. So I try to drive the point home that it's good to use your study time as opposed to waste it. And so I use this sentence as one example. Some students use study time wisely. And then my following one, some students waste study time. Followed with a period. And that, of course, is my first formula. Sentence, sentence. And there we have it. The next example I give them is the same thing. Some students use study time wisely. And I see that I left out the word time up here, so I'm going to add it in. Some students use study time wisely, semicolon, and some students waste study time. And that is sentence, semicolon, sentence, period. Now, they might not realize that a semicolon can do the job of a period. So I like to add that little bit of information in as a little bit of a note if I haven't already done it. And I tell them that I think about a semicolon as functioning the way a period functions. Now, I know that there are other things semicolons do, but I'm dealing with writing compound sentences here. And for my purposes, I want students to be able to see the semicolon and the period as interchangeable, realizing that that's not entirely true, but it does work for the purpose of illustration because it gives students a context in which they can think about the semicolon. I can tell them that any place I have a period, if I want to show that what comes before that period is closely related to what follows it, and in this sentence, these two sentences, that's the truth, I can tell them, just change that period to a semicolon, change the capital letter to a lowercase letter, and you have now created a compound sentence that gives variety to your writing. I move on from there to the next example, which of course is the coordinating conjunction. Some students use study time wisely, comma, but some students waste study time, period. And that is a sentence, comma, coordinating conjunction, and in this case I used but, followed by a sentence, period. That's that example. And it doesn't really matter if you put that formula at the front of the sentence or at the end of the sentence. The point is that putting it with the sample helps students really see the idea, see the concept, and the image of the formula reinforces the syntactical structure in the sentence. The next one is some students use study time wisely. However, comma, some students waste study time. And I'm doing what I do with my students here. I type each sentence out individually rather than copying and pasting. Most of them don't have a laptop or a device on which they're typing. They are handwriting, and I want to keep this in real time for them and for you as well. And of course, my formula is sentence, capital S, semicolon, conjunctive adverb, and in this case it's however, followed by a comma, sentence, period. And I might want to just go ahead and move this to the next line to illustrate the formula a little better. I tell students that the reason we use the comma after however is that we don't have to have this word in the sentence in order for the sentence to be grammatically correct, in order for the sentence to make sense. And that's why we put the comma there. The comma tells us, hey, you don't have to have the conjunctive adverb, but having the conjunctive adverb clarifies the thought. It shows a relationship between the two sentences that we are connecting and using to compose a compound sentence. I'm now ready for this empty set. So I go down here and I type some students use study time wisely, comma, knowing that this is an error, some students waste study time, period. Now, this is that empty set that I don't want students doing, so I go ahead and I strike through that whole thing. That strike through is a reminder, hey, don't do that. That's where you end up with the RO over the punctuation in a sentence that you've often seen from your teachers in the past. You've created a run-on sentence and you don't want to have a run-on sentence. So follow one of the formulas that you have up here. Follow the pattern. Think of it the way you think about a mathematical pattern, if you will, or even various ways that you can run a play in a sport, football, for example. And that hones in on some of the things that my students like. I found this little formula to be very successful over the years, and I've had many students tell me that it helps them learn how to formulate compound sentences and avoid run-on sentences. It makes them aware of how they are connecting ideas with punctuation and serves them quite well, and I hope that it is as successful for you and your students as it has been for my students and for me over the years. Thank you.